Hello once again. I have got something so cool to show you guys today. Those who follow me on Twitter have been suffering incessant tweets about this thing because I have been so friggin' excited to get it working good, which I have, and to show it here on YouTube. This is a Smith Corona Electra SS electric typewriter from 1970, and this is a very, very special typewriter. I'm not sure if it's rare, but it's definitely uncommon. The Electra SS is so much less common than other Electras and other typewriters in general. Now, just looking at it as it is right here, you may wonder what is so special about this thing. From a first glance, it looks like an Electra 120. It's got a 12-inch platen, manual return. But when you look a little closer, and you look at some of the badges, you see cordless, solid state, battery, charge. It's true! This is a battery-powered electromechanical typewriter. The second one ever made, and the last one ever made. There were only, as far as I know, in all my research, there were only 2 attempts at a battery-powered electromechanical typewriter ever made. They were both by Smith Corona. The Electra SS is a battery-powered electromechanical typewriter. Smith Corona's first battery-powered electromechanical typewriter was called the PowerWriter, and that was around 1963. And then in 1966, roundabout, they replaced the PowerWriter with the Electra SS, which had a lot of improvements, a lot of usability improvements, and a couple of more features. And the Electra SS was sold from 1966 to at least 1970. That's when my unit was made here. This is essentially an Electra 120 that has been redesigned to use a DC motor instead of an AC motor, and it has an internal battery pack. And it is so friggin' cool. These did not sell well. Neither the PowerWriter or the Electra SS sold well. They were expensive. They were among the most expensive typewriters that Smith Corona sold, and so they simply didn't sell many of them. And so you don't come by these on the used market very often, and when you do, they're usually quite a bit more expensive. How expensive? Well, I'm going to be upfront, although a bit sheepish about it. I paid a little over $100 for this. Only $30 for the item, but the shipping cost was $66 to get it here to Canada from the United States. It actually wasn't any cheaper to ship it to the United States alone. But yeah, that's what I paid for this thing, and that's about the going rate. You can find ones for cheaper if you look long enough, and you'll often find ones for way, way, way more expensive. As far as I'm concerned, I paid a fair price for this one. Although, it arrived not in the condition as described. The seller described it as, works great. When I got this thing, it didn't work great. The motor was stiff. Couldn't turn fast enough to make the unit operational. I had to get inside this thing and lubricate the heck out of the motor to get it working, and it is working well now. Unfortunately, the motor does have a bit of rumbliness to it. It's got a bit of play in the shaft, so I think the bearings are a bit worn, which puzzles me because the rest of this unit doesn't seem to have had that much use on it. But yeah, I think the bearings in my motor are a little bit on the worn side, but the motor does work just fine. And it's not too noisy or anything like that. So that's the story with this thing. Really, really unique. One of only 2 typewriters of this kind ever made that I know of. And it's really, really neat. So before we dig into all the cool DC and battery bits, let's take a look at this thing, see what kind of features it has. So again, this is basically an Electra 120, which was a super common AC powered model. You can get them a dime a dozen on the used market. Really great typewriter, some of the most reliable typewriters ever made. But there are a couple of differences to it. we'll start up here with the carriage. So we got a 12-inch carriage. There's your margin set. And normally, on a typewriter, I have my margins set at 10 and 75. But on this one, I have them set at 25 and 100. And the reason for that is because being a manual return, of course, you get to the end of a line. There's the bell, nice sounding bell. You get to the end of a line, and you got to shove it back with the manual return. Doing this causes the paper to advance. You have your paper advance setting right here, so there's that. So the reason I have my margins, I essentially have my paper set further to the right so that I don't have to shove the manual return arm all the way to the middle of the typewriter. It's a bit less awkward for me. If I had my margins set at 10 and 75, as I normally do, I'd be sending the manual return arm back here and moving my hand across the lid of the typewriter, which is a little bit awkward. And if I wasn't careful and I was putting down pressure on the return arm, it would be scraping against the paint of the lid here, which it looks like might have happened before, and I don't want that to happen. So I set my margins at 35 and 100, and I only have to go that far. Your paper bail, of course, right here, and your release right here. And something I learned when I got this thing is that this lever and this lever are supposed to have plastic knobs on them. I've never seen one of these Electras with the plastic knobs on the levers, but this one had them. And the very first time I used these levers, the plastic knobs snapped in half and broke off. And now I know why I've never seen one of these with the plastic knobs, is because they've all broken off. I found them after they flew away. Here's one of the plastic knobs. This one's not quite broken all the way. This one is broken all the way. So yeah, these typewriters originally did not have the bare metal, although the bare metal certainly looks fine. They originally had plastic knobs, like this one, over them. So luckily, I should be able to glue these back together and then get them resituated on here. And that'll be just fine. Now, in my video of the Smith Corona Electra 210, I talked about the platen release, but I didn't demonstrate it because I didn't know how to do it. But what I've since learned is you can release the platen on one of these in about 10 seconds. Let me demonstrate. Lift this up. There's this little lever down here. You got to push it. Oh, move your bail out of the way and flip this up. Push it quite hard. Ta-da! Your platen comes out. And it makes it much easier to clean the platen and the rubber rollers which sit under the platen, which I definitely had to do on this machine. Those rollers needed quite a bit of cleaning. They weren't working well at all. And then to put the platen back in, put it in, make sure the right hand side is lined up with this guide here. Lift this release again, snaps in. Done! Super easy to remove the platen on one of these. Very nice. You've got your paper backrest right here, your carriage release, one on either side, and of course the return arm. The return arm has a color matching rubber pad on each side of it. As you can see, this typewriter came in the common blue color, which is nice, one of a few colors that were available on this. And I just realized there's this lever right here too. When you squeeze that, that's also a carriage release. Oh, but it only moves it a little bit. Huh, weird. It goes between approximately the middle of the carriage and the left margin. Maybe this is just so you can put the carriage back in the middle when you put the typewriter away in the case. I did get the case with this thing. I'll show it later in the video. I wonder if my Electra 210 has this lever. Because I set a tab. I have a tab set at 55 so that when I want to put this away in the case, it brings it right to the middle of the carriage so it can fit in the case. But maybe I just gotta use that lever. I don't know. Anyway, moving along, there's your keyboard. Very similar to the Electra 210, except no power return key. You've got your ribbon reverse right here. This thing does do automatic ribbon reversal, but you can do it manually if you want. And something I've learned is that the unlike later electromechanical typewriters, these ones only support automatic ribbon reversal if the ribbon was made with a little metal eyelet at each end of the ribbon, because once the ribbon gets to the end, that little eyelet will catch on this part, and I see now, and it pulls it like that, and that triggers the automatic ribbon reversal. This ribbon doesn't have the eyelets, so whenever the ribbon gets to the end and the print starts fading, I gotta remember to reverse my ribbon. There's your backspace. Backspace is mechanical on this. You got your space, your power space, both of those are electrically driven. No half space, which is interesting because the Electra 120 does have a half space. So I wonder if there was some mechanical limitation that this one couldn't have a half space, or did they just not bother to include that? I don't know. There's your margin release. Keep squeaking my couch. And we do have both the equals and plus and 1 and exclamation point keys. Unlike my Electra 210, which is missing the type slug for this key, this one does have it, which is good. I'm still waiting for the US-Canada border to open so I can, among many other things, get that coronet that I bought on Shop Goodwill forever ago so I can steal the type slug off it and put it back in the Electra 210. Anyhow. These are your tabs. This big thing that looks like a second spacebar, it's actually your tab key. And something that's so cool on these Smith Coronas that seemed to be lost on later electromechanical typewriters was that instead of there being permanently set tabs every 10 characters, you can set the tabs on this one wherever you want. So like I said before, I have a tab set at 55 spaces, hold the tab key and it goes to it. If I want to set a tab somewhere else, like at around 45, I hit the set key, and when I hit tab, it goes to that one, goes to the next one, and I don't have any ones set after that, so it just goes to the right margin. Clear a tab, hit the clear key. Now what's kind of funny is, I don't know if it got jostled in shipping. This thing was packed really poorly in shipping. I'm really surprised and glad that the case wasn't dented or that anything wasn't damaged, because the seller did a terrible job packing this thing. Basically, the typewriter was in the case, and the case was put in a cardboard box with bits of styrofoam for padding. Terrible, terrible job. I'm really glad there was no damage as a result of that. But I don't know if it was because of shipping, or if somebody thought they were being funny and did it to this thing decades ago, but there was a tab set at every single character. Every single character had a tab, so when you press the tab key, it was just like pressing the spacebar. And I was worried about this because I wondered if the tab function was broken, but no, there literally was just a tab set at every character. So how to do that, if you have a bunch of tabs set and you want to get rid of all of them, you hold the clear key down and then you go all the way to the left of the carriage, hold the clear key down and then hold the tab key, and the carriage will move all the way across, clearing all the tabs as it goes along, as long as you hold the clear key down. So that's an easy, quick way to clear all the tabs at once. So there's that. Here's your impression control. It controls how hard the keys hit the platen. And this works completely differently on the Electra SS than it does on other units. Other units, as I showed in my Electra 210 video, they have that idler pulley driven by the motor that acts sort of like a continuously variable transmission. When you turn the impression control, it varies the gear ratio, the effective gearing between the motor and the mechanism. And when you turn the impression control up, it changes that gear ratio to speed the mechanism up. so that it hits harder. The Electra SS does it completely differently. The impression control is actually electrical. It varies the voltage going to the motor. So it varies the speed of the motor directly by adjusting the voltage. This is just a potentiometer controlling the internal power supply. So that's really, really cool. So when you turn the impression up, you can hear the motor speeding up. It's really awesome. It's a very cool way of having done it. They could have done it with the continuously variable transmission method, but they decided to use the power supply instead. For this reason, the impression control on this thing only works when you're running off AC. When you're running on battery, it does nothing, and that's because when you're running on battery, the power supply is bypassed. Power goes directly from the battery to the motor, so there's no impression control. So it only works on AC. It kind of intrigues me because I think they probably could have had a CVT set up just like they do on the Electra 120, but maybe for electrical power considerations they couldn't do it. I don't know. Beats me. But very, very cool how they've done it here anyhow. Your ribbon color control is right here. Black. In the middle is for stencil modes, and that's nice because the type bars don't actually hit the ribbon, so you can test the typewriter without putting paper in it. And then you've got your red mode. Really cool. This thing came with a vintage ribbon. Here it is right here, and it's actually a Smith Corona brand ribbon. You can see right here. But also interesting, take a look at this. It is one of the uncommon, and definitely hard to buy new ones now, correction ribbon. Half of the ribbon is black and the other half is coated with this whiteout stuff. So if you made a mistake, you would backspace to your mistake, switch the ribbon control to red, which on this ribbon means the white part, and then hit the mistaken letter again, and it punches whiteout over the letter. I talked about this in my video of the Smith Corona Electra CT that I used to have. And I'll say it again in this video, don't use these. These suck, and the reason they suck is because the white part flakes apart and it gets all over your type bars and it can flake off and get all inside the mechanism. My Electra CT was super gross inside because it had all the whiteout material flaked off and all over the mechanism, and then dirt adheres to that, and it's just a mess. These are a mess to use and not worth it in my opinion. So don't use them. The whiteout part on this ribbon still actually works. I did test it, but the black part is all dried out. But what I'm going to do is, because this is a Smith Corona branded ribbon, I want to keep these reels. So what I'm going to do is take the ribbon off these reels, and then I've got this ribbon, which came off an adding machine that I don't have now. And it's just like a typewriter ribbon, same width and everything, and it's got the black and red. So I'm thinking I'll take the ribbon off this and wind this ribbon onto this. As far as I know, that ribbon's still perfectly good, even though the red part looks well used. I do believe it's still good and prints red and everything. And yeah, I'll just load that ribbon onto these Smith Corona reels, and I'll put it in either this unit or the Electra 210. And I think that would be pretty cool. These aren't as cool as these look like they're from the 80s. That was one of the Smith Corona word marks that Smith Corona used in the 80s, possibly 70s too. But the even older ones from the 60s and before, they had metal reels. These are just plastic. The older ones were metal, and I'd really love to have a set of metal Smith Corona ribbon reels someday. But these are still cool in themselves for now. So yeah, that was kind of neat. You got your shift and shift lock. Shift is electrically actuated. Like all Smith Coronas from this era, it's a basket shift. So instead of the carriage itself moving up and down, the type basket moves up and down. So here's the power switch. You have 4 positions: off, AC, battery, or charge. When you're plugged into AC and move the switch to charge, the typewriter is off and it will charge the battery. In any other position, regardless of if you're plugged into AC or not, the battery will not charge. This was a massive improvement over this typewriter's predecessor, the Smith Corona Power Writer, the first battery-powered electromechanical typewriter ever made. The PowerWriter did not have a full-fledged power supply. It instead had a very rudimentary circuit whose only function was to charge the battery. So you could use the PowerWriter plugged into power, but you were still drawing power from the battery. It's just the charging circuit would be charging the battery simultaneously, and because the charging circuit could not replenish the battery as fast as you were using the battery, you had to be mindful when you were using the typewriter on AC to not, accidentally leave it running or something, because you would still run the battery dead and the charging circuitry would not be able to run the typewriter on its own. So with the PowerWriter, you needed a good battery to use it, even on AC. If your battery was dead, you would have to wait for it to charge before you could use the typewriter at all, regardless of if you were plugged into AC or not. The Electra SS improved that a lot. There is a full-fledged power supply in here that not only charges the battery, but it also provides rectified, filtered, regulated DC power to the motor, so you can use the typewriter on AC regardless of the condition of the battery or if there is a battery at all. And we'll talk about the battery later in this video. So yeah, that was a big improvement with the Electra SS. The PowerWriter also did not have an impression control because there was no power supply, and they decided for whatever reason that a mechanical speed adjustment setup wasn't viable. The PowerWriter simply had no impression control. If you look over here, you have the nice blue Electra SS badge, and then you have this indicator that says on. This is not a light that lights up when it's on. This is a mechanical indicator, and it's supposed to be connected to a linkage with the power switch, and when the power switch is in different positions, this indicator mechanically changes to something else. When the typewriter's turned off, it's supposed to be black. When it's turned on, it's supposed to look like it is right now, and then when it's charging, it's supposed to show red on either side and black in the middle to show that you're in the charging mode. That linkage is disconnected. There is a C-clip that was supposed to connect the power switch linkage to the indicator, and that C-clip has fallen off at some point in the decades. If I can find a C-clip that'll fit, I'll be able to put it back together and it'll work just fine. In the meantime, this indicator is not functional. It just always says on. Actually, if I pull the cover, and I think I can finger it myself. Yeah, here we go. So there's on, there's off, on again, and then that's what charge looks like. So there's that. Now you may wonder, what was the purpose of this thing? Who was this marketed for? And I think a lot of people did, and that's probably why this didn't sell well. If you needed a portable typewriter that you could carry anywhere, use anywhere, even if there wasn't electricity, you could just buy any old manual typewriter. If you wanted ease of typing, you bought an electric typewriter. Smith Corona made these for the person who wanted the ease of use of an electric with the portability of a manual. And while this certainly functionally serves that purpose, it definitely does so with some sacrifices. For example, this thing weighs 26 pounds, whereas a manual typewriter, like a Smith Corona Classic 12, for example, the first typewriter I ever used back in 2012, they weigh quite a bit less. So this is a lot heavier, but you get the ease of typing of an electric, and apparently there just weren't that many people who wanted an electric that could run on batteries. If they needed ultimate portability, they'd get a manual. If they wanted something electric, they'd get a standard AC powered electric, because both of those were cheaper than this. This and the PowerWriter were the most expensive typewriters that Smith Corona sold in their respective lineups. So it's not a huge surprise that this and the PowerWriter did not sell very many units. So let's take a look around the unit here. There's a profile, and as I said in my video of the Electra 210 this generation of Smith Corona typewriters are just beautiful. They're just beautiful to look at. A work of art, really, in my opinion. All metal design, and you've got sort of a halfway design, halfway between the steampunky design of the 50s and the more angular designs that started becoming popular in the 70s. This was sort of a halfway between those, and I think the result is just beautiful. Looking on the back, I think the back of this thing is very handsome. Smith Corona, these particular Smith Coronas were designed to look very nice, very clean in the back. You can see Smith Corona. Of course, the company itself was called SCM, Smith Corona Merchant, after Smith Corona merged with Merchant, a company that made adding machines. This was, of course, made in the USA. And the SS in Electra SS stands for solid state, as you can see right here. And of course, back in the 60s, solid state was a buzzword. If your product had one transistor in it, you marketed it as solid state because that was a money word. That was all the rage. It's like when it's like 10 years ago when, you know, you'd walk into Family Dollar and they'd be selling TV antennas as HD compatible, because that was the buzzword at the time. HD, high definition, even though it was no different than any other regular TV antenna. So yeah, a bit of a buzzword. Even though this is definitely not an electronic typewriter, it's all electromechanical. It qualifies for the solid state buzzword because there are, get ready for this, 2 transistors in the power supply and several diodes, and so that earned this the name. That's your mechanical latch when it hooks into the case. Oops. That's about it. This one came affixed to a sticker from the business that sold this, Lone Star Typewriter Company. Calculators, office equipment, sales, service, rentals, paper. There's a phone number, ribbons. And I'm actually going to Google right now. I wonder, I'm almost certain, they're definitely, if they still exist, it's definitely not under this name. But I just wonder if I can find anything regarding their history. I'm only guessing they're in Texas, but I'll find that out as well. Give me a minute. I'm back. They were in San Antonio, Texas, and they were still existing in 1987. That's the only information I found. But very interesting nonetheless. I will keep this sticker on here just because presumably they were the ones that originally sold this thing, so it's a bit of history along with it, which I think is worth keeping on there. So let's get to talking about the unique bits, and that's the electrical bits. So when we flip the typewriter on its rear, we get this cover here. Now the Power Writer and the Electra SS, because of the circuitry that had to be housed, this housing is exactly the same as any other Electra or Coronet, and it wouldn't have fit a power supply board or a PCB or whatever. So they added this cover that sticks out about, what, an inch or so. And that's where the power supply and the battery is housed. Interestingly, it's got a little circuit breaker right here. I don't know what that breaks. I don't know if it breaks on the AC main side or if it breaks on the motor side. I have no clue, but it's there. Oh, there's your touch control, how hard you have to press the keys for it to trigger. And that's where the front latch of the case latches into it to keep the typewriter secured in the case. So yeah, the Power Writer and Electra SS had this extra piece which makes the typewriter even thicker than it already was. And Smith Corona also gave it the big rubber feet. The normal Electras didn't have this, but Smith Corona sold a range of larger, more expensive typewriters for office use called the Secretarial series. They were based on the same chassis, but they had, you know, they had like a longer carriage and some other features that made them more suited for standalone, you know, office or business use rather than personal use. and they had these large rubber feet rather than the 4 smaller rubber feet that the normal Electras had. But the Electra SS and the PowerWriter, they got these large rubber feet as well. And yeah, these 2 screws remove this cover, and that's how you get access to the power supply. But if you just had to get access to the battery, there was a little door right here. Now, Smith Corona called the battery the Power Pack. It was a custom-designed battery manufactured by Gold National Batteries. It was a 4-cell NiCad battery, probably 2 or 3 amp hours in capacity, and it had 4 cells. Each cell was half the length of a D battery, but the diameter of a D battery. So it was like a D battery chopped in half, and this had 4 of them in series. So nominal voltage 4.8 volts, peak voltage 6 volts, and it was accessible from this cover. This one did not come with a battery installed. It doesn't matter because 50 years later, those batteries are definitely not going to be good anymore. But what's nice about a battery like this is that it's super easy to make a replacement. If you're really handy, and there's someone I've read about on Facebook who's done this, if you're really handy, you can build a battery that'll fit exactly like the original. And it'll fit the spring terminals on either side of the battery compartment. Someone who's a member of the typewriter group on Facebook that I'm a member of, they bought a Maglite battery, a NiCad Maglite battery on Amazon, which is a 5-cell battery, and they just took 1 cell out, and the Maglite battery happened to be the perfect length to fit in this and work and fit just like the original battery. That's pretty cool. I've done something different. Let me get a flat blade screwdriver so I can open this door and show you. So we open it up here. And this is kind of ugly looking because it's just temporary. I will have a more elegant solution when I get the parts I need. But here's what I've replaced it with. 4 nickel metal hydride AA batteries. And they work great. While physically much smaller than the original battery, the capacity was probably similar. And AA batteries certainly don't mind the power draw of this thing. You would think a 26-pound electromechanical typewriter would have quite the current draw, but it really doesn't. Idle, the motor only draws 350 milliamps. Under a heavy load, when you're doing some fast typing, it might double that, or around 700 milliamps, which still isn't bad. So yeah, AA batteries work just fine, and with nickel metal hydride AA batteries, I can actually use these just like the original. Plug the typewriter in, and it can charge these batteries no problem. Charge current is about 175 milliamps, and so far, I haven't charged these batteries up all the way yet, so I still have to monitor and see, because it's just a dumb charge circuitry. There's no charge termination or anything like that. Basically how the charging works is you plug it in, you leave it 10 hours, it's more or less a trickle charge, so there's no great danger of overcharging the batteries. You just charge it overnight and the next day it's charged and you can unplug it. And with the original battery, there was no danger of overcharging. But the thing is, nickel metal hydride batteries, while they can replace NiCad batteries, they have one caveat, and that's that they're more efficient for charging. Nickel cadmium batteries converted a lot of the charge current into heat. So it's, as long as the charge current is an appropriate level, there's no harm in leaving a NiCad battery constantly charging, because once it's fully charged, it'll just convert the extra energy into heat. But nickel metal hydride batteries are way more efficient with charging, so if you're not careful and if the charge current is too high, they can overheat. They're not able to dissipate energy as elegantly as NiCad batteries can. I had a bit of an incident, not really an incident, but that Epson Action Note 4 SLC 33 laptop I have, which originally had a NiCad battery, I replaced it with 8 nickel metal hydride AA batteries, and while it worked great, the charge current was too high, and I learned the hard way that the batteries were being severely overcharged. They were very hot. It didn't destroy the batteries, they didn't leak or anything, but they got hot enough that they melted they wrinkled the label on the battery a little bit. So I want to be careful. I'm still monitoring this. I want to make sure that the charge circuitry in this doesn't cause these batteries to overheat. If it does, I will have to devise another solution, maybe using sub-C cells or something like that. Or I might just go with a completely different solution. I've considered using lithium-ion batteries, 2 in series, with a resistor to cut down the higher voltage to an appropriate level. I wouldn't be able to charge them internally, but they would be a good solution to power this thing, especially because I have so many 18650 cells sitting around doing nothing. So that's something I might do too. But I'll be testing this 4 AA pack. I'll see what the behavior is like when they're fully charged. If they start overheating, then I'll devise something else. If they don't, then I might just stay this way. But there's the battery terminals that the original battery would have pressed up against. In this case, I just have wires soldered to the battery terminals for this one. And yeah, it's working pretty well. So, let's go deeper. Let me take these 2 screws out so we can remove this entire cover, and we'll check out the power supply and take a look at the motor as well. Alright, here is inside the Electra SS. There is your power supply board, which supplies charge current to the batteries and power to the motor, so you can use the typewriter on AC. 2 TO3 package transistors here. They are Motorola SP2530. I hope these never die because I've looked on eBay and there are 0 replacements available. There is a transistor called the 2SD2530. I don't know if that's the same or not. If it is, then there would be no issue there. But hopefully these transistors never go bad. Look at these beautiful big capacitors. I will be replacing these. If you have one of these, replace the capacitors. Even though these old caps in their metallic blue finish are really pretty, just for the sake of, you know, the reliability and safety of the thing, just go ahead and replace these. Even if you got these capacitors and put the new replacements inside of them to keep the original look, that would work too. But I do have 2 capacitors on order. This big one is 5,000 microfarad at 12 volts. The replacement I ordered is 4,700 microfarad at 16 volts. And this smaller one is 500 microfarads at 50 volts. And the replacement I've ordered is 470 microfarads at 50 volts. My replacements are a bit lower because 470 and 4,700 microfarads are standard values, so they're commonly and cheaply available. You can get exact replacements for these, but they'll be much more expensive. But 470 and 4,700, that's going to be perfect for these because back in the, back half a century ago, these capacitors probably have 20%, if not 50% original rated tolerance, which means that 470 and 4,700 is still going to be within spec. And they'll especially be fine considering these capacitors are now half a century old and probably not within their original spec anymore. But they are still working fine. There's no buzzing in the motor or anything when I run this thing on AC. It's working absolutely perfectly. But I will be replacing these just to make sure. Got a couple of 5-watt resistors on here, and we've got 2 trimmers. I don't know what this one does. This one is a master voltage adjustment. So you've got the impression control, which adjusts the voltage to the motor, which is right here. But this is sort of a master adjustment. On this unit, it's turned up all the way. Let's take a look at the motor. The motor is really cool. Look at this motor. Turn you sideways here. It's made by Black & Decker. And I never knew that Black & Decker made motors for third parties. I'm not sure I ever figured they made their own motors at all. But yeah, Black & Decker motor. Very, very cool. It's rated 4.9 volts DC at 800 milliamps. The PowerWriter, I believe, used a different motor, or at least I assume, because in a article about the PowerWriter, which we will look at later in the video, they mentioned that the PowerWriter's motor was rated at 5.2 volts. So presumably the PowerWriter had a different motor. But yeah, really nice motor, big beefy motor, as you can see for the ratings it has. It's a very big motor. I reckon it's very overbuilt and very understressed, which is good. You may wonder what voltage is fed to the motor. It's rated 4.9 volts. Well, the impression control, when it's turned all the way down, the motor is fed with 4.9 volts. When it's turned all the way up, the motor is fed with 6.0 volts. So that's the voltage range given to the motor based on the impression control. And of course, when you're running on batteries, nominal voltage of 4 nickel-based batteries is 4.8 volts. Or if you're one of the types that uses 1.25 volts for the nominal voltage, then that would make it I think I'd make it 5.0 volts nominal if you use 1.25 per cell. Peak voltage is going to be about 6 volts. So running on batteries gives the voltage about the same range. And like I said before, the impression control is bypassed when you're running on batteries, so your impression is going to be solely based on the healthier batteries. You're at the mercy of the batteries. If your batteries are fresh, the impression is going to be quite heavy, and as your batteries drain, it's going to get lighter and lighter. Eventually, it'll get to a point where the motor's turning too slowly, the impression gets too light, and the type is not very good quality anymore, and that's when it's time to recharge your batteries. Other than that, it's all standard Smith Corona in here. This is exactly the same inside as pretty much any manual or electric Smith Corona typewriter going back to the 40s. Smith Corona never changed this mechanism from the 40s up until they quit making electric typewriters in the 80s. So very proven, very reliable mechanism here. The only difference is, or at least the biggest difference is, we've got a DC motor instead of an AC motor powering it. Something else I love about this thing compared to an AC powered typewriter like my Electra 210, DC motor is way quieter. Even though mine's got rumbly bearings, it's way quieter than an AC motor. I'm going to turn this on and listen to the motor. Super quiet. Go back here. You can barely hear it. It's so quiet. Really, really nice. And there's the bearings starting to rumble a bit, which is too bad. But there you go anyhow. So yeah, there you go. That's pretty much the inside of the Electra SS. What's this say? Do not attempt to repair or remove this circuit yourself. Any attempt to do so will invalidate Smith Corona's guarantee on your Electra SS. Oh crap, I don't want to do that. Contact your purchase source or nearest SCM service center if service is required on the electrical circuitry mounted to this base assembly. Luckily for me, 50 years later, this is still working just fine. Oh, the motor's starting to speed up a bit. The motor usually speeds up a bit after it's been running for 30 seconds, just after the lubrication warms up a bit and gets a bit thinner. It's able to spin easier. And actually, while I button this thing back up, I'll show you a clip I took back when I had this housing off. You can take the lid and the bottom housing off these to get easier service to the motor. I took the housing off this so I could get to the front bearing of the motor easier to lubricate it. It's tricky to do, but once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad. But I'll show you a little video I took while I had the casing off this, just so you can see the pulley, the belt and pulley system that the motor drives. I almost forgot to mention, down there is where the power cord goes. It's a weird, non-standard power plug, or maybe it used to be a standard, but it's certainly not anymore. But here's what the cord looks like. If you get one of these without the cord, I imagine it would be easy enough to retrofit some other power plug in there. I've got the typewriter plugged in now. I'll turn it on in AC mode. I'll let you listen to it again. And I'll turn the impression control up and you'll hear the motor speed up. Like that. So, I say that's enough yammering about this thing. Let's actually demonstrate it. But you know, why demonstrate it on this coffee table like I always do? We have an Electra SS, one of only 2 battery-powered electromechanical typewriters ever made. We can go anywhere. We have batteries. We can take this thing and type anywhere we want. And so I say, to the bedroom. There you go. That's what it looks like. Red type. Looks nice. Very, very, very nice. When you've been spoiled by power return typewriters, which is all I've ever owned until this thing, using the manual return takes a little getting used to. But as you could see, I certainly got used to it no problem, and it's kind of fun. It's kind of got a fun aspect to it. It's certainly more, you're more connected to the thing when you have to do your own returns rather than just hitting a button. So there's sort of that romantic aspect to it, if you will. Let me show you the case for this thing. There is the case for the Electra SS and the case for the Electra 210. As you can see, because of the larger 12-inch platen, the Electra SS's case is longer, and also presumably because of the extra cover that has to be on the bottom to house the power supply, it's a bit thicker too. As you can see, I have not cleaned it up yet. This is about what the case for the Electra 210 used to look like. Quite dirty, but I will get to cleaning it up at some point. and then it'll look a lot nicer like this one. So yeah, very cool. Once again, metal case made by Samsonite. These were great cases. So much better than the horrible plastic cases that Smith Corona started using in the 70s. There you go. Inside is still really dirty. And then down there it says, made with care, packed with pride. Smith Corona typewriters are made in the USA by American craftsmen. 5-year parts guarantee. Made in the USA. Very nice. And I'm once again glad that the poor packing job that the seller did to this thing did not result in any major damage to the case. I do feel some minor dents, but I'll be able to punch those out, no problem. And yeah, there's that. And finally, the giants meet. The Electra SS and the Electra 210. I love both of these typewriters. I think they're both beautiful. I will be keeping the Electra 210. Although I probably won't be using it as much now that I got this thing. This thing is just so novel to use with that cordless battery-powered operation. But these are both beautiful typewriters. I still like the green color of the Electra 210 more. But they are both very, very beautiful typewriters. Slight pitch difference in the bells here. Listen to the Electra 210. And then the SS. Slightly lower pitched. I think every single Smith Corona has a slightly different sounding bell. But there you go. 2 absolutely gorgeous typewriters. I love it. We're now looking at an article about the Smith Corona Power Writer from the November 1963 issue of Popular Mechanics magazine. And the thing is, Smith Corona heavily marketed the Power Writer. Of course they did. It was the first ever battery-powered electric typewriter. But they didn't really market the Electra SS as much. So there's not really any neat articles or advertisements about the Electra SS, but there are for the Power Writer, so we'll take a look at them here. So this one begins, electric typewriter, has battery, will travel. In the image here it says, power plant is revealed as Popular Science, Popular Science, not Popular Mechanics, my bad. As Popular Science senior editor Joan Steens lifts Power Writer, shiny cylinder near power pack is DC motor. So there's power pack, the battery, and the DC motor. It hisses softly, it leaps at a gentle touch. It's smooth and sleek. What makes it special, however, is that it can go anywhere. It's a portable electric typewriter, battery-powered. You can type cordlessly for up to 10 hours. I think that's a giant lie, but that's what they claimed at the time. You can type cordlessly for up to 10 hours and then recharge the cell via the nearest 110-volt AC outlet. Or if you're nowhere near AC, you can carry extra power packs with you. The dual power $199.50 machine, which is about $1,500 $2020. So this was expensive. On the market since April is the Power Writer, the newest design of Smith Corona. A nickel-cadmium battery powers a 5.2 volt permanent magnet DC motor that drives the keys. A silicon diode rectifier recharges the battery whenever the Power Writer is plugged in, no matter the operating switch is on or off. Leaving the machine plugged in overnight will fully recharge the cell with no danger of overcharging. It's said to be rechargeable a minimum of 400 times. Other advertisements said 300 times, so that's kind of funny. Things I liked about the Power Writer in the course of 2 weeks testing are its sensitive touch control, its clean white keyboard, the line retainer, and the repeat keys, the dot, dash, underscore, X, and spacer. The casing itself is handsome and comes in light gray, charcoal, or green. Things you might not like: the lack of full automation, margin setting and carriage returner manual, the weight, 26 pounds, the proximity of the shift lock to the A, and the machine's whispering hiss. I grew used to that hiss. It seemed to give my work an inspired sense of urgency. So that was from Popular Science, November 1963. Here's a snippet from the August 1963 issue of Motorboating magazine. Battery plug-in electric portable typewriter called the Power Writer has been placed on the market by Smith Corona. The self-contained nickel-cadmium power pack provides up to 10 hours typing time and can be recharged as many as 300 times by plugging into an AC outlet. The machine has a standard 88-character keyboard, automatic repeat action on dot, dash, underline, and X, and the spacebar, and will make up to 6 carbon copies. It's available in a variety of typefaces in addition to the standard Pica or Elite, and in colors of green, light gray, and charcoal gray. $199.50. Here's one from Boating magazine, January to May 1966. Electric typing on a 64-footer, of course. In a dinghy? Why not? This Power Writer is the world's only battery-operated typewriter. Imagine being able to lie out on the bow on a sunny summer afternoon and still get some typing done. Electric typing. Even without an electric outlet available, a Smith Corona Power Writer will always deliver that wonderful print-like look, the kind you get at the office. We give you the cord to use where current is available. That way you conserve the power cell. You can also use the cord to recharge the power cell when that does become necessary. There's another thing that Smith Corona gives you when you buy our Power Writer, a 5-year guarantee. So there's that one, and they've got a picture of the Power Writer and the battery. Very nice. Well, that, my friends, is a in-depth look and demonstration of the Smith Corona Electra SS battery-powered electromechanical typewriter from 1970. I am absolutely in love with this thing. There have been few things that I have been more excited to get, checking my mailbox for that card every single day, than this thing, and I am really, really happy. It was another fun restoration project as well, although I wish the motor hadn't been stiff. I wish it worked great like the seller said, but it came back no problem. And this was a bit dirty too, just like the Electra 210, and it was fun making it look nice again. And look nice, this definitely does. This is going to be real fun to use. Granted, I don't use a typewriter very often for actual real-world use, but when I do, this thing's going to be the one I pick, at least for the next while. I just get a lot of enjoyment out of this thing. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little look at this thing, and I hope you found it to be cool like I do. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.